wound up here in 2008 the great exporters of American money, the great exporters of American wealth. We need to turn this around. We've seen a slight improvement here in the most recent years, but all of this red is basically China. What's happened is that the United States has given up its manufacturing power to China and to a few other countries. We can see this in certain industries. For example, the automobile industry. Thankfully, as a result of laws that were passed by the Democrats and signed by President Obama, giving him the power through the stimulus program, the American Recovery Act, the power to bail out the American automobile industry. And he did. The President said, on my watch, I will not allow the American auto industry to die. And he took action. He bailed out General Motors and Chrysler, and in so doing, saved the American auto industry and the tens of thousands of small businesses that rely upon that industry for their jobs. However, that's only part of the story. And here's the rest of the story. Other countries that are automotive manufacturers have been able to increase their supply chain, and while we still have an automobile manufacturing sector in the United States, we heavily depend upon imported parts for the assembly of automobiles here in the United States. And so other countries actually manufacture the parts and assemble the autos, but not in the United States. We assemble, but we also import many of the parts. We can change this. And here's what the Democrats want to do. We want to change the trend line. We want to rebuild the great American manufacturing sector. And we can, with good, wise public policies. We say, make it in America, so that America and Americans can make it once again. Manufacturing matters. I want to share with you, and as my colleagues begin to join me, some of the ways in which we can do that. Now, you may have noticed that I'm working on the tail end of a cold. So I use a lot of charts tonight. Here are the policies that we want to put in place. We want to seek manufacturing within the United States. We want jobs and income within the United States. We're targeting specific industries. And we want to align the trade and tax policies in the United States so that we can, once again, reignite the American dream. We're going to go into these in somewhat more detail, and thankfully, as I clear my throat and use this lodging for a few moments, Mr. Tonko, my good friend from New York, will take over for a moment.
Well, always willing to help a sore throat get soothed. Representative Garamendi, thank you for bringing us together in a manner that allows us to look closely at the American economy, the American dream, and the decline of manufacturing that represents a serious concern for workers across the country and represents a serious concern for communities. As we engage in this effort to grow jobs and retain jobs, it's important to look at the statistics out there and just where was the focus, where was the emphasis on job creation and job retention, and could we do a better sort of stewardship, if you will, of our resources and our policies. And I believe the answer is a resounding yes. We can do better. And as was made mention by Representative Garamendi, it is important for us to acknowledge that the work done here, the challenge, the crises that face us, can also be transformed into opportunities. And the opportunity here for this great nation, for the powerful force that we are in the global economy, the opportunity here is to reignite the American dream. Reignite that dream with the underpinnings of support that comes through three separate dynamics. First, engaging a small business comeback, inspiring that comeback because the small business is the pulse of American enterprise. It is replete with a history of mom-and-pop operations, of ancestors that built their American dream into an ideas economy, into a service economy that enabled small business to become that very promising enterprise. Second leg of the stool would be that of entrepreneurs, those movers and shakers, those builders, the dreamers, if you will, in our society that constantly inspire us with job creation that is driven by ideas and the moving of ideas into a product and enabling us to, again, create that engine of ingenuity and creativity. And then finally, a thriving middle class. These are the basic principles. A thriving middle class that is driven to have additional purchasing power simply by policy that is done so that there's tax fairness, tax justice in our outcome. And so reigniting the American dream is driven by those principles of small business, entrepreneurship, and a thriving middle class. Basic, simple approach that we have embraced as Democrats in the House, driven by a set of policies and goals that will enable us to look at all sectors of the economy and understand that the manufacturing sector was grossly ignored. We focused primarily on service as a sector of the economy, ignored agriculture, ignored manufacturing. And when the focus was on service sector, it was primarily onto the financial services where, when they were given free rein, turned our back and said, do as you like, we found that that drove America's economy to its knees. And so now we look at the results. We look at the history of the last decade or two, and the precipitous loss of manufacturing jobs from 1997 to 2009, a 12-year run, produced a loss of 6 million jobs in manufacturing alone, Representative Garamendi. And what that meant was that indicated, that reflected, personified the largest such loss in world history. That's unacceptable. So when we talk about reigniting the American dream, there's work to be done. There's work to be done, and it's time for us to engage in a set of policies, resource advocacy, and goals that are established to create those ladders of opportunity, to enable people to climb up the economic ladder as we had done from our time as a nation and from our humble beginnings, where rags to riches scenarios were commonplace, and where America saw, where immigrants saw this land as the promised land. That's history that ought to speak to us, and we can bring back, through the appropriate advocacy here, the climate that creates manufacturing jobs and makes us competitive in a global economy.
Mr. Tonko, thank you very much for joining me. I needed a break.
Yeah, you sounded
beyond that, let's talk about the specific policies that we've been discussing amongst, well, here in the House, legislation that's been introduced, the specific policies that will bring back the American manufacturing sector, because indeed it was specific laws that were written here over the years that were largely, in my view, responsible for those outsourcing of jobs. An interesting word, outsourcing. Until December of